Greetings, good evening, folks. Welcome to the Joko. Welcome to this week's conversation. I am Brother Youssef, member of the Joko, a teacher, a professor of composition, creative writing, and literature at Santa Monica College, um, and a Joko member since the very beginning of the Joko, the call, right, to gather. And that call was made by my partner and my comrade, Tasha. Hi, Tasha.
Hey, Yusuf, you said, and greetings, everybody. Um, really looking forward to tonight's conversation. Bubbling. It's like bubbling. It sparkles with me, Yusuf. It's bubbling, and
You.
um,
That's cool.
yeah, it's. I forget where that's coming from. What we were
South
what it
Park.
was we were watching.
That's
It
a
was
South
South
Park.
Park. Okay, that's the South Park reference. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, really sparkles with me.
it
Um,
sparkles
yeah,
with you.
and yeah, so yes, greetings, and beginning as we always do. It's usually upon me to do our opening invocations and acknowledgments, and we always acknowledge our personal personal lineages, right, that produced our bodies and so many of our values and situated us in a set of primary experiences that also um, make us folk that are valuing of justice, that are valuing of humanity, that are valuing of humaneness, right?
Mm-hmm.
That are valuing of um, the work and the liberation and the pursuit, all that's involved in the pursuit of creating that, right? All of that is part of
Mm-hmm.
right magical journey of lineage, right? And in and of itself is a point of gratitude. I always wonder at how, and I'm in awe, of how people make it to this set of questions, in their life path and this set of values. Because certainly it's not a given, and certainly um, not everyone is carrying them. I certainly consider it a
Mm-hmm.
blessing and acknowledge our personal lineages in that, and then we acknowledge the innovators, thinkers, resistors, generals, uh, other kinds of organizers, priests, uh, root workers, right? All in the African family of which we are a part that have effectively organized over the centuries to resist um, colonial, imperialistic, capitalistic, and enslavement, oppression, and that which generates and the other oppressions, and all that generates the miseries that drive us to resistance and that drive us to right the rush toward creating this just world.
Mm-hmm.
Right, there have been so many members of the African world family who have um, guided the African family and thereby humanity toward that goal, toward that end. And so we always acknowledge that. We always acknowledge and look at our grounding in our understanding that any work that we do for liberation of our African family, of the world family of oppressed peoples, we do at the hospitality of the ancestors of the First Nations people on whose land we are living, right? On whose lands and unceded territories. Um, we are privileged to do what we can to contribute. Um, as many of the First Nations folk, or some groups of First Nations folk, refer to the area as Turtle Island, as the geography is as Turtle Island, and we look and reduce in that space unceded territories of the Tongva people, um, associated with what's the colonial LA basin, right? And so we always acknowledge that it's at the hospitality those ancestors and the folks that are continue to work for their sovereignty and cultural preservation and neutralizing the myth of having eradicated the indigenous presence in this turtle island. We always give that acknowledgement. So give that acknowledgement, and it took what, 7 minutes? Okay, we're gonna get snappier and shorter with our acknowledgement well, so we can we're going to learn that conciseness. All right, and so having done so, we're here to talk about the arts and organizing tonight, riffing off the
Yes.
inspiration, yes, coming
Mm,
from and riffing off um, Brother Yusuf's wonderful, what we call our talking head video on cultural work, where he provided a dynamic definition and context of this this thing that is referred to as cultural work, and identifying what it means to be a cultural worker, right? And with that, I pass you the mic so you can
I'll take,
express on get the conversation started. Yeah.
yeah, I'll take the mic. Um, and since you put it in the context of the why we say cultural worker video, thank you for the props. I'm glad you liked it so much. Good. The so we continue to attempt to make our contributions as cultural workers. Right? The but in keeping with that ethos, right? The revolutionary ethos, even the reform ethos of the tradition of the cultural worker, right? Or that framing, right, of how one is characterizing one's works in the fields of culture, or the field of culture and its various manifestations. It's used as organizing, right? Our title tonight, right? The arts and organizing. Um, because one of the things I talked about in that video, there are those of us who consciously identify as cultural workers, and recognizing that is a political stance, right? That's why in that video I shared that quotation from the late um, Erickson Acosta, about that, that the to call yourself a cultural worker is implicit in that, is that you're connected, right, to a political movement, and political organizations, um, again, as opposed to the bourgeois image of the individual genius artists kind of thing, right? But artist is idiosyncratic loner. The
Mm-hmm.
So to be connected to political well, it's just that, right? It's political organization, right? You were about to say something.
No, no, no. Actually, I wasn't. I'm just listening and nodding.
Mm.
Hearing. No,
Just
I have
that,
nothing
right?
to insert.
Because that's what we're talking about, how the arts are fundamental, or at least can be and should be fundamental in the organizing effort, right? The political organizing efforts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
just that,
What's
right? And
that?
of course, there's a long history of it, right? Of and depending on how we want to look at it, but that very intentional use in it, certainly in modern political movements and modern political movements of the left, though certainly on the right, right? Because we talked about the fascist aesthetic, right? And that is
Mm-hmm.
political
Mm-hmm.
organizing
Mm-hmm.
on the right,
Mm-hmm.
right? And deploying the
Mm-hmm.
artistic in that. The
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
But you think about one of the a song that is still primarily I think identified with the civil rights movement. We shall overcome. But before the civil rights movement emerged out of the labor movement. Um, and there's a long, there's a history, right? That folks often look back to the 30s, the era of the Great Depression, where there was such effective organizing going on, though, right? And so much of the accomplishments of the New Deal um, were they were able to be accomplished because of the political pressure from the left,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
from the trade unions, various unions, the Communist Party, etc. Right? And so I think I just keep thinking back to the many concerts that somebody like in the 30s, 40s, somebody like Paul Robeson would give, right, at labor events, right, or concerts put on to
Mm-hmm.
raise consciousness, raise funds, right, for different kinds of labor
Mm-hmm.
movements, and and events that would be attacked by the right. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so it's art. The arts can be so effective in pulling people in, right, to be organized,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Um, Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. And yeah, absolutely. And something that I'm interested in also, because arts can often be seen in um, maybe radical to revolutionary organizing circles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think of that, it's often seen as an appendage to a support vessel for
Mm-hmm.
ornamentation or decoration for the main thing, right? It's the garnish
Right.
for the entree,
Right. Mm-hmm.
that makes it look pretty and more appealing, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in um how art production, right? Cultural production, I'm going to say it another way, intentional, deliberate, um, ideologically situated cultural production is a site of organizing, self-contained site of organizing in its own right, right?
Right.
Um, and and in that sense, underappreciated, and I would think therefore under fulfilled, underutilized, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and it also does some things, uh, produces some kinds of effects, experiential things that are that just opens that, for lack of having a better way of saying it, opens up some characteristic energies and some kind of like energies that are characteristic at least of the art presentation experience, right? um I think that even beginning with that, part of that is there's a different expectation that the way someone carries themselves to a quote unquote artistic presentation, production, participation, whatever it is, right? Oh, I'm going to be in art. There's just beginning with that, a different way different kind of receptivity someone brings to that space. I think that there is one of the things that is brought is an expectation for wonderment, right? There's an expectation of a whole different level of active listening, of active viewing, of active,
Mhm.
what comes to be affected and moved and provoked, on a different level. And that's one of those kinds of pieces. And the next thing I'll say before passing the mic back is um, looking at the way, like, we often relate to the way culture is suppressed, has been suppressed for African people as part of the um, forced assimilation process, as part of the um, containment process, right? The outlawing of various cultural practices, which varies from place to place and has different kinds of effects. But part of that outlawing, and seen in all cultures, you know what I'm saying? Seen in all colonized among all colonized people, yeah. Um, the criminalizing and outlawing of cultural practice as a yes, as a tool of deliberate containment of the imagination and identity, but also because those sites are also effective sites of organizing, right? There are places where the would be oppressed, gathered, even in a mode that was even somewhat untranslatable, but really a site of power building, of courage building, of energetic connection, um, that was problematic, right? And remains so, but certainly problematic. And so we do recognize that, you know, and also I think it's important to recognize that those are places where we are producing cultural artifacts in the ways that you've described, right? Culture and culture work in the video as education, all of that, which is knowledge making, um, art making, idea producing, inclusive, right? In that cultural work. I pass back the mic.
That's an interesting place to pass it. The to well, let me see where you said something earlier that I wanted to use as a jumping off point. Um, but then you said more, and so I actually lost I lost my point,
Okay.
and I'm
Remember
trying
what it was like?
I'm trying
What I
to
said?
bring it back. Um, you know about that's it, the organizing, right? The opportunity for organizing, or the arts as a site of organizing. Yeah, it starts with the artists, though, right? I mean, the cultural producers themselves, the various poets and writers and sculptors, etc. Right? It's a chance for the artist and the artisans, and the crafts people, right, to organize themselves. And that's an important place, right? An important
Mm,
advance, right? Because
mm,
that's part of
mhm,
that's organizing part of the working class, or
mhm,
organizing a sector of the
mhm,
colonized working class, right? Or the
mhm,
colonized nation, um,
mhm,
and can be a place where, we often talk about the intergenerational, but there needs to be a sort of an interclass
mhm,
engagement. And quite frankly,
mhm,
though, that interclass engagement is likely going to require, um, class suicide on the part
mhm,
of
mhm,
anyone who can be described as upper class or upper middle
mhm,
class, all these whatever these various things,
mhm,
and I always think
mhm,
that's a little tricky, right? Because,
mhm,
at least overgeneralized, because there are certainly people, and especially among Black folks and other colonized
mhm,
folks, who
mhm,
are like first generation middle
mm.
class,
Right,
right? I mean, they're
right.
still, however many, 60 years after, um, 70 years after Brown versus Topeka, Kansas, or the Board of Education, and however many,
Mhm,
60 whatever years since, what's his name, James Meredith, is trying to integrate the University of Mississippi and all these other things. We still,
mhm,
we are still, and I see this, right, in my work. Um, there
mm,
are still
mhm,
large numbers of first-time college students, right, coming
mhm,
in
absolutely.
through community college, through the 4-year schools,
Mhm,
um,
mhm,
such that, right, there might
mhm,
often that also then be first generation
mm,
middle class, right, or upper middle class,
right.
or depending on
Mhm,
their ultimate
mhm,
path, right, but
mhm,
still retain those working class values that they grew up with, right. So that's why I
mhm,
think it's always a little tricky when we're talking about colonized communities, because across the board, the African descent populations, the indigenous folks, including those, the Chicane folks, etc., right,
mhm,
are
mhm,
still first generation, right? Whatever
mhm,
whatever the stereotypes about the
mm,
so-called model East Asian minority and maybe South Asian minority, so often first generation college students still, right, etc., right,
absolutely, right.
and likely most white students too, right, still most
Right,
likely,
absolutely.
certainly
Yes,
those from working class backgrounds, right. the
yes. Mhm,
And so there's already, that sense of, um,
mhm,
you know working class values, mores. Of course, one of the things we're encouraged to do, even before we get
mhm,
to college, just,
mhm,
through this kind of the rhetorical environment of the
mhm,
society, is encouraging all of us to commit class suicide in favor of the bourgeoisie, right?
absolutely.
And indeed,
Mhm,
we all work in the interest of the bourgeoisie anyway, because everything's
right,
structured, for the ownership class. The
right.
but all that started with the point, those opportunities for organizing,
Yes.
the artists themselves, right, who are, as we know, another sector of exploited labor on
Yes.
so many levels,
Yes.
right. And as you know,
Yes.
one of the things that we do when we go to see a movie together,
Mhm,
or that I do, and I know you do when you're with me, is
mhm,
we watch all the credits, right, to the very end, and the
mhm,
lights come on, because
Mhm.
all those people put in some work, right? That, all
Mhm.
of those people help produce that film in some kind of way,
Mhm.
and are likely undercompensated, right, for what
Mhm.
the film may end up making. Um,
Mhm.
those who are, well compensated, it's because of union activity in Hollywood during the 20th century. And I think
Mhm.
they're being subjected to gig work whenever folks can. Hence, we've had these couple of strikes, right? And those are strikes of cultural workers: the writer's strike, the actor's strike, the recent, uh, animation voice actors, right? Strikes. The So that,
Mhm.
but other
Mhm.
opportunities for organizing. So again,
Mhm.
that opportunity to organize the artist and keep artists in
Mhm.
organization and collectivity with each
Mhm.
other, right? Um,
Mhm.
and then however the art is being deployed,
Mhm.
as an
Mhm.
organizing tool, right? To organize other sectors of the working class, other sectors
Mhm.
of the colonized communities. Um, and good organizers always have art there, artists there, right? And I was
Mhm.
thinking about, in preparing for this, I was thinking about things like um, oh, I just went blank on there. Well, I was thinking about Bernice Reagan, right, and
Mhm.
the work that she and maybe it was it the Fisk sing, maybe it was the Howard. She was at Howard, maybe, but anyway, the folks, the singers who would go to the
Yes.
demonstrations, right, and
Yes.
continue singing, and what that meant to the people there,
Yes.
right, in terms of lifting, as you were saying,
Yes.
right, lifting their
Yes.
spirits in a moment,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
as well as um, conveying information, right, offering
Mhm.
analysis, right, through song, through
Yes.
poetry, etc.,
Precisely.
right,
Yes.
and so many other examples. I mean, the examples are all
Right.
over the place. Another thing I was thinking about, I haven't seen them lately, which is a little surprising to me. For example, I don't remember seeing any from the footage of the No King's Day demonstrations. But these were very prominent in the run up and opposition to U.S. Imperialism in Iraq, particularly the Second Iraq War. Do you remember the large puppets that were part of demonstrations?
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I, and that eye grabbing, right,
Right.
grabs attention.
Right.
Um,
Right.
that well, we do see it with like the baby Trump balloons, right?
Yes.
But it's they're saying something though, right? They're offering a critique,
Yes.
and analysis, in that
Yes.
animated
Yes.
sculpture, right? Um, that can bring people in, and those who might be on the periphery or not quite understanding, can get some notion of why those people are in the street from something like one of those puppets, or
Mhm.
whatever songs are being sung,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
etc.
Mhm. Mhm. Certainly, in terms of the projection outward of deliberately employed as part of uh, protest work. Um,
Mm,
yes, the attractive and provocative element and the way that that symbolism communicates uh, beyond, you know, um, a beyond beyond doctrine, beyond indoctrination,
mhm,
beyond a
mhm,
specific ideological indoctrination,
mhm,
and which I'm not poo pooing. I'm not poo pooing that. I would say that again, this whole question of deliberateness and agency and self-conscious and all of these kinds of things figures, I feel, very heavily into this question of the potentials for art production as sites of um, their own right, their own self. I'm thinking, I don't know why I'm thinking in French, right? But their own self propre, I want to say propre, right? Their own self sites for producing the kinds of these kinds of very important energies to
Mm-hmm.
and collectivizing and producing symbolism effectively is certainly one of those things. Another
Yes.
element that
Yes.
I feel is very, very important in
Hold
terms of
on.
art.
Hold
Yeah,
on.
go ahead.
Don't lose your second point, but I
I won't.
think that
I know I'm
it's
saying.
worthwhile to, immediately follow up on that symbolism, right? And
Yes.
the importance of that, right? And I mean, this is the whole point of, in some ways, of like the Betsy Ross story, right? Of uh, the need to create a symbol, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even that we see the right wing is deploying now with the redeployment of the "Don't Tread on Me," flags. And I mean,
Yeah.
that is really key, right? And that
Yeah.
thing that you pointed out that culture provides, right? That the production of those symbols, that folks can rally around, right? And in some ways, it's sort of crystallize, the ideology for them, right, and becomes embedded in that symbol. Right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so.
thinking about,
And
as you said, I was thinking about the red star, right? The
yes.
meaning of the red star or the black star, right,
Mm-hmm.
and so many others, right? Just yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And not to mention the solidarity fist that
Mm-hmm.
has so much currency and so many translations. You know
That's
what I'm
right.
saying? Very
Mm-hmm.
much thought of. And interestingly, um, in American popular mind, the solidarity fist loses its association with worker solidarity and is
Right.
contained in association with Black
Right.
Power movement, Black Power. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even going to say Black solidarity. I'm
No,
just going to
but
say
Black Power,
Black
right? It's the
Power
Black.
movement,
People will call
right?
it the Black Power fist,
The
right?
Black Power fist.
So isn't it
These kinds of
interesting?
things.
And to
Hmm.
me, it says a lot about the level of insecurity and jealousy. But
Hmm.
isn't it interesting how often Trump over the years has tried to deploy that, fist,
That
right?
little fist up.
Yeah,
Hmm.
right.
Yes, it is
As he's cosplaying
interesting.
being black, when he does that, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
there's, I think, especially coming out of that era and think,
With
his particular age. So I'm sure
symbol
there was a
world.
certain jealousy about the militancy of young black people at that time that you're not only on the outside of, but even the target of, right? As a scion of the bourgeoisie, even if it's new money and not old money.
Mhm. Mhm. And in so much in American culture, the loss of the distinction between in American popular culture between old money and new money.
Mm-hmm.
For us, money is money. For Americans, money is money. Money and is the
Mm-hmm.
of end all be all.
Exactly.
So your billion is the same as uh, Rothschild's billion is the same as,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying, what have you. But a very important, right, of course, historical connection and context to that needs to be understood. That, as we have talked in other discussions, is uh, consistently lacking, consistently and importantly lacking. Not allowing folks to, as they say, connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I didn't forget where I was going because one of the things that I wanted to talk about in terms of the viability of art space, again as a point of um, power building and identity building and all these kinds of things, is that for poor people, right? For people who do not have a lot of who don't have the currency, those kinds of means to go into um, various kinds of spaces to practice, to develop, to take as a hobby, to, all these different kinds of ways that um, art production is labeled. When space is created for that in community, it becomes a site of deep personal transformation and deep personal empowerment. And I really started thinking about that going through the community literature initiative, you know, contemplating the effects of a PASLA, an inner city cultural center, right, a place where a space and a place and a project wherein the individual community member can come and self create, self transform, right? It's a holistic kind of entity. You are learning, skill developing, expressing, and discovering that voice and that power. And going back to the CLI experience and just kind of the poetry space experience that you hear, where people say this always, over and over again. They tell their stories of personal transformation and personal empowerment, usually described as finding my voice, Um, and I think that that is the therapeutic value for oppressed peoples of art
Mhm.
making, of artifact making. You know what I'm saying? Um, just repays in um, in order of magnitude, that input, and like the piece with the input into it, the uh, input of practice, right? Exposure.
Mhm.
And one
Mhm.
thing about poetry is you need a piece of paper and a pen, or pencil. You know what I mean? To
Or a rock that you can scratch out somewhere, something. I mean,
a rock that you
or
can
if you got
scratch
the
out.
memory for it, you
You
can
can put it
compose
in
and
your head,
memorize, as
as
folks used
people
to do.
do,
Yes,
as
exactly.
people do,
For
and the more.
right, yes, exactly. And you have your body with that you can use to sing and that you can use to
Absolutely.
dance.
Dance, all of the
That
things,
you
right?
can beat out rhythms on. So.
Absolutely. And so it's in that very powerful agency, that taking
Hmm.
up of and expressing. There's not a time um when that is not constructive work, where that's
Yes,
not
that's
constructive work. I'm thinking about, and however that is, because there's also a place where we pull back, and look at the hierarchies in this culture, um, the hierarchies in, yeah, contemporary culture and colonial, imperious, racist, da, 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 all of the isms and schisms and classisms and whatnot that separate out artifact production into various levels of worthiness, right? So there's the vulgar, the folk, the naive, all of these things, the vernacular dance, an experience that I had many years ago, but doing uh, uh, basically, I supported a dance company doing a residency at a local high school, and they're very geared into getting young, talented, right, folk into colleges and to
hmm
pursue arts, take specifically dance programs and whatnot. And it
hmm
was always quite striking to me, that the notion was that these talented read un read raw material, right? These
hmm
talented young people could go to these institutions so they could really study,
hmm
and at the time, Crumping was what we were doing in the community. And the young dancers, right, at every opera break opportunity would gather various places on campus to practice their craft, to produce this unique next expression of black dance. You know what I'm saying? But in the mythological universe of American culture, and that is aspires to assimilation and has all of these kinds of embedded notions. The notion was that, oh, these are very talented. Let's them very talented young people. Let's see how we can send them to a place where they can really learn about dance,
where they can
and
learn, discipline and technique, and these
right, where they can you learn
various
discipline and
things, and
technique.
um,
And it's absurd
right.
because
Or
that's all it is every day.
where they can get classical training. And I mean, the yes, that's
Yes.
so
And
as you're
a state
talking about that
definition.
experience, it reminded me of the classic 80s hip hop movie, I believe Beat Street, with
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Ray Don Chong, I think was probably the biggest name in it.
Yes.
um
Yes.
where, it was that sort of thing, right? The breakers on the street in New
Yeah.
York, and she was the classically trained dancer, choreographer who sees them, and it's like, look, we
Yeah.
need to bring this uptown, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
there's
Right.
that
Right.
inevitable clash, but of course, they end up, being themselves, right? Why were we brought here? And there's a whole
Yeah.
bunch going on in that movie with, the graffiti artist and the
Yes.
DJs. It's a classic, right?
Yes.
But anyway, I thought of
Yes.
that, right? Just as that of the bringing the street uptown, so to speak, and
Yes.
how often does that
Yes.
happen? Um, and whether or not people are serious poets or not, or any of this type stuff, right?
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, that's
Whether or
always,
not rap poetry, these
and all
ongoing
that.
debates,
Yes.
devaluing and devaluing necessarily because those structures are meant to reproduce the status quo power
Right,
relations. They
exactly. The
aren't
status quo and the
liberatory.
dominant
They are not
society,
liberatory.
right?
Yeah.
The dominant culture. Um, yeah, the approved,
And
right?
it's
The officially approved and legitimated
yeah,
forms.
legitimated, and the extent to which, while because at all times, right, there is a siphoning and appropriation of the cultural forms of the oppressed, the cultural expressions, the cultural artifacts of the oppressed, right? Now you see young sisters. When I was coming up, when I was young, right, 19, 20, like where everybody is wearing belly beads now, you're right, waist
Wearing what?
beads. I'm calling them
High
belly
speeds. Okay.
waist beads, right? The little glass, a string of glass
Yeah.
beads, like the small.
Speeds
They're
on
basically
waist.
called seed
Yeah.
beads. Yes, waist beads now. And when I was coming up, was when that was a a thing that was done in the West African dance community, very specific to a very specific cultural expression coming from, right, the waist bead, right? And people made waist beads and sold waist beads to dancers. It was, I mean, there was an economy of that, right? And so now it's become quite popularized in our Black and brown communities. Everybody's wearing waist beads. How this happened, I don't know, but I do know where it came from, right? And they do wear it with a kind of consciousness of what it represents, certain, just being in conversation with the young people, the teens. I looked up on a billboard for some, maybe it was Dior or Chanel or whatnot. The other day I'm driving by, and the model, who is not African descendant, who is if while we're talking Sweeney, while we're talking about the whole eugenic representation, this was a model of European descent who represented, and also the outfit, the representation. It was definitely a class projection, an wealthy class projection. This was not the Gap. This was Dior. This was Chanel. And by gummit, she had on like a gold, some it was gold, it was a waist bead, bottom line. She had on waist beads, which we are always familiar with. We know and we always witness the of cultural production, particularly in fashion, right? Of uh, uh, of presentations and customs and all of these kinds of things from the working classes, and particularly, I think, particularly, this is probably just my limited awareness. You know what I'm saying? Um, as being part of that Black conversation about that kind of appropriation. So I was gonna say, particularly from African folk, and definitely for a time in the 80s, the models had on big heavy earrings, and you know what I'm saying. So there is also a space for absorbing the cultural forms in this kind of subversive space. And the reason why I'm saying subversive, I'm going to use another term, closeted, because you were talking about the ways, the class suicide that's necessary for an interclass kind of cultural space that is liberatory, that is actually liberatory, and authentic in its exchange, right? Because there's always a space for dipping in, learning the culture, and then taking it back and claiming it, and reproducing it in your class image and likeness, and being hailed as unique, innovative, and all these different kinds of things, right? That also aligns with that the idiosyncratic artist trope, notion. Um, but yeah, the way that those spaces, and we do, it's a vital site where we create dance, where we are creating word and language and literature, where we are creating on our own terms with the resources at hand out of our own abundance. Very important power experience, a very important experience of actual power, in that sense. I'm not talking about political power as such, I'm talking about a personal power, that I think is very helpful for us, because one of the major things that we need are places for psychological healing, and right, and therapeutic devices, to to get back to that kind of, okay, I am here, I am doing, this is pulling, my stories together, my understandings, which can also very easily translate into that next level of systemic understanding about and one's place in the madness, right? In the general chaos. Mike back.
So the arts are all, so people have forever, and certainly again in modern movements, look to the arts as part of their organizing efforts. And there are plenty of examples, um, from historically and internationally, right? And again, there's always an expectation that there is a cultural wing of the national liberation movement, for example, or a cultural wing of the revolutionary movement, and by cultural, right, the arts, but other things, right, the propaganda wing, even, right, to get the ideas out, the ideology, the yeah, and imagining, right, of a liberated nation, a liberated people. So art, again, artists are critical to that. Certainly, Emory Douglas of the Black Panther Party was a key organizer, right, through his art. And the Black Panther Party used to have a funk band, right, that would play. At I think they were called the Lumpin. Yeah, the Lumpin. They may have
Hmm.
had more than one. The
Mhm.
Lumpin out of Oakland, and a funk band, right, that would play at events, play, raise raise money for the party, etc. And a couple, but I think what a jazz album, I believe. Elaine Brown, who's also a singer, along with all of her,
Yes.
political acumen and everything. You
Right.
know, what did a jazz album, I think, with the Pan African People's Orchestra.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
I know that the LA chapter released a jazz album, and I think it's with the Pan African People's Orchestra and Elaine Brown. Seize the Time. I wonder if that can be found somewhere. That's got to be
Mhm. I'm
classic.
sure.
Um,
Right.
Speaking in capitalist terms, right? The value of an album like that would be probably off the charts. The Us organization produced a jazz album, and maybe also with the
Mm.
Pan African People's Orchestra, possibly, or at least something.
Mhm.
Kawaida, I think is
Mhm.
correct. Which of course makes sense, and um, or I might be mixing. Well, the Us organization did produce an album, but also the Herbie Hancock produced an album, um, and at least one member of the group at that time was a Kawaida practitioner. Uh,
Mhm.
Produced an album, I think that might have 7 pieces on it for the Nguzo Saba. So anyway, right,
Mhm.
the way in which art has is engaged and remains engaged as an organizing tool,
Mhm.
as a site of organizing, and as a support, right, for other types of organizing. The So
Mm.
you're talking about direct experience with the CLI, Community Literature Initiative, and which is,
Mhm.
how many years old now, and um, is producing writers in the community, right? All walks of life, um, maybe even class backgrounds, but certainly just folks in the community, right? Who are
Mhm.
that language of finding their voice, being able to tell their story, do something they've always wanted to do. Um, and in other areas of art, as what was it, just this past weekend, or I guess a week ago tonight, right? That we went to the opening at what
Mhm.
is it, Glass and Quill Gallery, uh,
Mhm.
next door to the Sims Library of Poetry, right? So these two arts institutions now that are um, self-generated, community, generated Black um, art institutions, right? That are trying to be as much as possible self maintaining, or at least community maintained, particularly in a moment when the fascist regime is withdrawing grants for the arts across the board, really, right? The
Mhm.
and But and I bring that up because there, right, celebrating what, 4 women who were exhibiting their visual art, um, and maybe for the first time exhibiting it in a gallery like that,
Mhm. Mhm.
who
Mhm.
had, in the Q&A talked about, just needing to express themselves in another
Yes.
way, right? And uh,
Yes.
the So again, sort of the possibility for both personal and community transformation as people go through that together,
Yes.
um, and the way in which that is, uh, always a site of resistance, um, and,
Mhm.
and and then even in areas that we don't necessarily think of as the arts, but are certainly artistic, um,
Mhm.
running up against this, the dominant culture that those who legitimate culture and decide whether something is art or not. Um,
Mhm.
as I think about, you're talking about the kids who are crumping, and
Mhm.
continue to, to value that
Mhm.
on their free time, right? To
Mhm.
stay
Mhm.
sharp and honed. Um, two things came to mind. It's no longer there, and I'm going to misname the street. Uh, Fulton is the cross street. Um, I can't remember this street in San Francisco, right down the street from uh, you from the University of San Francisco. So I actually could probably look it up. But anyway, it's a school. It's a school in San Francisco. John Adams, I think maybe middle school. But on during the 1980s, it had a mural on its, one of its embankment walls along the major street, and it said La cultura cura, right? Culture cures, and that's certainly about colonized cultures, right? Re-embracing our
Yes.
culture, and
Yes.
um, as an act of agency, self, affirmation, um, and resistance. I remember this the first time hearing about this, and it has continued to be an issue. Black women in particular, African women in particular, African descent women, being challenged or sent to the boss's office or somehow admonished for wearing their hair naturally and particularly in braids,
Mhm.
despite the level of artistry that
Mhm.
goes into that braiding, right? That as your,
Mhm.
what did your mother call
Mhm.
it? Hair sculpture.
Mhm.
The first time I remember hearing that was like 1980. A black news anchor decided to wear
Mhm.
her hair in braids, and this was
Mhm.
like some,
Yes.
the studio was going to burn down or something, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
things that um, simple,
Yes.
that every day, right? Our acts of
Yes.
cultural resistance, of artistic
Yes.
resistance, and
Yes.
opportunities for organizing. Now,
Yes.
there are
Yes.
schools in South Africa, and they're probably white schools or integrated schools that had issues with the African students wearing their hair naturally. It's like you got to have
Mhm.
a perm if you want to go to school with white people type situation.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So all of these various areas of
Mhm.
artistic expression,
Mhm.
including the way
Mhm.
young people, trick out their fashion statements or whatever, right? And
Yes.
that embrace, those of us who are colonized, the embrace of our non-Western cultures, right? Our non-Western
Mhm.
styles,
Aesthetics. Yes.
our
Yes.
local versions of the non-Western, that, as you pointed out, are typically, um, let's see, first condemned, demonized, and then
Yeah.
appropriated and
Yeah.
monetized, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
somehow claimed, right?
Yes.
Uh, and we've seen it with how many
Yeah.
cultural products
Yes.
over the years that you don't even know anymore. Um,
Right.
like the English language itself, which how many words in English aren't even English, right? They're actually West African
Right.
or or South
Right.
Asian, or
Right.
Native American, or First Nations of the Americas.
Yes.
And
Yes.
to
Food.
English's credit as a language, it is open, right, to
Yeah.
incorporating that vocabulary and growing the vocabulary. But you don't even begin, you forget that a word
Yes.
like cookie ain't even English, right?
Mhm.
Never mind a word like okay or
Mhm.
toast, right?
Right.
Cultural appropriation,
Right.
that's it, just that the
Right.
appropriation becomes invisible. The
Absolutely.
And so anything just the fact that we continue to create is
Mhm.
resistance.
Mhm.
But I want to
And
shift a bit. Oh no, after your and.
um yes, and the degree to which that becomes a self-conscious process,
Mm-hmm.
going through varying degrees of self-reflection and conscious ownership of that process, and reflection on the relationship of that process in regards to power, right, and resources with other uh with other objects and other entities and whatnot. Yeah, it becomes um more and more a conscious tool. And what I'm responding to is the yes, just our being, just our expression, yes, is an act of resistance, because that is something that has to be closely policed and closely policed and criminalized or punished in one way or another, right? So that um, only, there's only one. It's very important to the project of colonialism, imperialism, relative to assimilation and all of that, that there's only one acceptable aesthetic, right? And it's also, I think, also very important lesson, or something really to look at, the yes, suppression, but also the way that dumbs down, the way that stunts, just kind of like the natural diversity of expression, conformity, the way that conformity and forced conformity, yes, it is to an aesthetic, a very specific aesthetic, but that's not you're right, all not all um everything doesn't fit into the same box, right? Everything, that's not even, there's nothing about that that is represented, represented naturally. So um conformity in and of itself is that forced conformity in and of itself becomes uh, a tool of, a tool of suppression, and a site of suppression on uh, of the work practice of art in and of itself. Anyway, that's what I want to say. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, this was we have some real life experience, and thinking about these opportunities for organizing, and artists who are particularly a similar mind and intent, right, to
Mm-hmm.
organize together, right. And so um, uh, since we've been doing the People's Mic, and
Mm-hmm.
intentionally organized for a space for political poetry, or politically minded poetry, and um, spaces, and really sharing spaces, um, where people are also trying to organize, right? Or the
Mm-hmm.
spaces we are going to as a nomadic
Mm-hmm.
poetry reading, rather than being um, situated in one space, one performance
Mhm.
space, um,
Mhm.
you know, allows for that those connections to be made, right? Amongst institutions and artists who are coming to the various institutions that we're performing at, and the
Mhm.
opportunities
Mhm.
we've had, right, to connect with
Mhm.
other artists of like mind. And I'm
Mhm.
specifically thinking about the Free 'em All open mic that has been founded. Um,
Yes.
the work of the spaces, the work that the Palestinian solidarity work that's happening at through Holy Ground, right? One of the spaces where we've
Yes.
read the ongoing, activism of the Harriet Tubman Center for Social Justice.
Mhm.
Um, the gym, right? That the Black Lantern Bookstore and Legacy Library are, right? And
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and again, very intentionally revolutionary space
Mhm.
where we're going to be this month, right? All Power Books, these intentionally revolutionary spaces where the people we're inviting, the folks who they invite and who come to enjoy and participate in the open mic, and we're trying to
Mhm.
create the space where they can talk, meet each other, talk, make connections. Um, you know, we've been able to do that, even connections you don't necessarily expect. So we recently participated in the Curbside Festival to raise awareness around U.S. political prisoners. As part of the of our participation at as the People's Mic, right, at the
Mhm.
Harriet Tubman Center, social justice center, we shared our poetry, but that's beyond the point, right? We
Mhm.
were able to connect with some people there, but the biggest
Mhm.
connection was coming
Mhm.
across the People's Cafe, right? This other element of the arts
Right.
who are using their
Culinary. Yes.
culinary skills as
Yes.
and consciousness raising practice, educational practice, organizing
Yes.
practice. So what did they had what a
Yes.
Vietnamese dish named after Ho Chi Minh,
Ho Chi Minh.
Cuban
Yes.
dish named after Che Guevara, right? Those are the two I
Mhm.
remember most, right? But there was
Mhm.
let me see, I think there was a Mexican dish I think maybe named after Zapata, but you get the idea,
It
right?
wasn't Zapata, right. You're just explaining it right for folk to find the People's
Emiliano
Cafe.
Zapata,
Yeah.
the Mexican revolutionary, Afro Mexican revolutionary. I'd rather uh, die on my feet than be a slave on my knees or live on my knees, something like that.
Mhm.
Quotation that's
Mhm.
attributed to Zapata, for whom the
Mhm.
Zapatistas are named, right? Though they
Mhm.
emerged some 80 years after his time. So anyway, the
Mhm.
way the People's Cafe, there's a food truck,
Mhm.
and I don't recall if they had a space in El Monte, but a food truck, right, that can go to these events, provide food for those assembled, and promote revolutionary principles, revolutionary ideas,
Yes.
revolutionary thinkers and organizers, and who won their revolutions, right? And
Mhm.
there was some dish named after the Black Panther Party or some member of the party. I can't remember it all, and I don't know if I got
Mhm.
a picture of the menu, although I know I took a picture of
Looking
their
for.
contact
Yeah.
information. The
Yeah.
But anyway, and the point I was getting to though is that those opportunities for organizing, as I mentioned earlier, right, the opportunity for artists to connect with each other, create their
Mhm.
own collectives, right? And
Mhm.
because we're in the United States, and because it isn't mainstream, and the mainstream would not prefer it, there's very little knowledge, I think, of how many artist collectives there are around the world and the work that those collectives are doing, or even in this country, right? Because that's not, again,
Absolutely.
the model of the artist that
Right.
the empire of the West, the modern empire of the West, especially,
Yes.
projects, right? Um,
Yes.
it is not projecting artists in collectivity, um, and
No,
working to create
protecting
justice,
the
right?
yes, at least as a celebrity, at least as a yeah, as a as an icon, as a right, as a
Hmm. Okay,
production.
I found it. Let me share the menu
Okay.
real quick. So there's
Okay,
the
cool.
Ho Chi Minh Saigon. It's one dish. I'm not going to read the
Yes.
dishes. I'm just going to give their names, right? Amaru's Rebellion, right? A dish. So that's a Peruvian inspired dish. Amaru's Rebellion. Amaru, a major Incan, rebel back in the colonial days, right? Maybe even the days of Pizarro.
Mhm.
I'll save that one for last. There's the Free Palestine, right? The Free Palestine dish, a Palestinian dish, or at least a Levantine dish. The Joaquin Murrieta Southwest chopped cheese. Joaquin Murrieta,
That
California
was
rebel, right?
yes.
For those of us
Yes.
locally here in California, and the Siempre 26, uh, always 26, Cuban Revolution.
Mhm.
And then my favorite, at least by name, the Chinga la Migra. um, I,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, let's see. Well, people cuss on YouTube, and we're not monetized anyway. And I don't know if
Yes.
they'll recognize it since it's not English. Chinga la
Yes.
Migra, um, the Chinga la Migra Chicken Tinga. That's the whole name.
Yes.
So anyway, People's
It's
Cafe,
really
though,
great.
right?
Yeah.
And with the artistry
Yeah.
of the dishes. And my mother loved the
Yes.
Ho Chi Minh, by the way. She thought it
Oh,
was so
good.
yes. Um, and the use of that, right, to raise consciousness, people who are unfamiliar, you can go find out who Amaru was, what is meant by
Right.
Siempre
Absolutely.
26. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So all forms
Absolutely.
of art, right, have and
Mhm.
provide those opportunities for the kind of organizing that you were talking about, right? Not
Yes.
just the arts as a kind of an appendage, or
Mhm.
some adornment for
Mhm.
rallies and such, which is fine,
Mhm.
right? But even in those
Mhm.
cases, they really need to be more than adornment,
Mhm.
right? They need to
Mhm.
they, they should be conceived as critical parts of the organizing effort.
Yes. Yes. And
The, um,
somehow and to the extent that direct action planning takes on the form of performance art, right?
yeah,
It has this very
that's right.
it it is impactful. It is impactful. It's
Yes.
impact itself. And then when we draw back, you know, from that, from our usual set of definitions and just kind of look at this continuum of production, um, in and of itself, we're always reproducing culture on in one way or another. The distinction
Hmm.
is
Right.
it ideologically centered? Are we doing it in a conscious way? And by conscious, I don't
Mhm.
mean a specific set of values. I mean, are we
But
in
a
a
mindfulness,
way
right? A mindfulness and
a mindful
an intentionality. Yeah.
yes, and an understanding of that of the power tool. And how the tool works,
Yeah.
in all of this conversation or this thinking about this topic. I kept revisiting because one, and you mentioned actually a few beats back, of the employment of arts in right-wing culture, right?
Hmm.
And in, because it's what it is, it's what it does. Advertising, the that consumerism and the development of the that is cultural work. It is
Yeah.
not
The
what we
commercial
call
artist. Exactly.
story. Yeah, it is cultural work, and
That's right.
something that kept intruding in my brain, as in thinking about this conversation, was the role of, that I read, uh, just superficially some time ago, read about some time ago, was the way that, what they now call hate rock, or white power music or whatnot, galvanized the point that the article was making was that the movement, thinkers, were aware of how the, white power, uh, appendage to the hardcore punk rock scene galvanized and drew in, and was what became a central feature. And so they started really investing in it and building up, this kind
Hmm.
of, uh, uh, hate rock, um, space. Started really building and investing in that. Um, and I think that those of us on the side of humanity and on the side of of all that is good, still carry an advantage. I think that there's going to be something stymied in that trying to employ, but just again that consciousness, that awareness, and the importance of developing and refining and growing in one's ideological specificity and one's understanding, and um and developing that voice in using that voice, whether it's a visual art voice or a performance art voice or a poetic voice or storytelling voice or whatever kind of voice it is. Um it's invaluable, right? It's invaluable.
Yeah. And critical aspect of any kind of revolutionary movement, right? See, what is the quotation? Is it the Emma? Is it Emma Goldman? And I might be getting the mix. There's Rosa Luxemburg. There's Emma Goldman, I believe. I can't remember which one
Mm-hmm.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what something to the effect: if I can't dance at your revolution, then count me out. Something to that
Mm-hmm.
effect, right? And I'm probably misquoting it, right? But yeah, if we can't dance, keep it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm. Emma Goldman.
because the
Mm-hmm.
revolution should be a joyous endeavor, right?
Yeah.
It certainly should be. And all
Yeah.
the various art, just as all the arts are deployed, sometimes consciously, sometimes just that's just the way things are, so it's quite unconscious and taken for granted. But they are constantly deployed to maintain the
Mm-hmm.
system as it is, right? To maintain the
Mm-hmm.
ideas, to limit the imagination of what's possible,
Mm-hmm.
what worlds are
Mm-hmm.
possible. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so the onus is on us to continue to use the arts to challenge that and prevent, or rather present um, a a brighter vision, right? A more human future,
Mm-hmm.
a more humane future, right? All the various things
Yes.
we need a
Yes.
clean future. That needs to be and victory, right? And victory
Yes.
through the movement, through the struggle, right, needs to be imagined, and resistance needs to be imagined, and expressed and shared, um, and old visions or of that, right,
Mhm.
need to be
Mhm.
part of
Hmm.
that intellectual diet. Um,
Mhm.
the a reactionary film, beautiful film, really good film, right?
Mhm.
Probably, or at least one of the best acting performances John Wayne ever gave, right? The
Mhm.
Searchers.
Mhm.
Searchers still matters as a movie. It's completely reactionary, totally racist.
Mhm.
Um, Picture of the old West and the conquest, right? And the conquest of the undeserving, um, you know,
Mhm.
First Nations. The
Mhm.
And it still matters, right? And it's still shown
Mhm.
because it still
Mm.
matters.
Uh-huh.
However old it is now, right? The Godfather trilogy, really, and I know a lot of people don't
Mhm.
like the third installment, but
Mhm.
it's really, they are telling an important story, right? And
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
this society. And
Mhm.
we need to hold, people should be watching the Battleship Potemkin, right? The old Soviet film.
Mhm.
Cuba Libre, or is it Cuba
Mhm.
Viva? Viva Cuba might be the title I'm thinking of, etc. Right? I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking about this conversation. How important, what would it mean if there could be some public showings and a chance to popularize Larry Clark's film "As Above, So Below," right? This with its revolutionary message, particularly in
Mhm.
this time.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
space um,
Mhm.
needs to be seized, right, to
Mhm.
deploy these arts
Mhm.
and what's already there and
Mhm.
what's continuing to be produced, but
Mhm.
uh, uh,
Mm.
for the movement at hand
Mhm.
to combat fascism, to
Mhm.
destroy colonialism and neocolonialism, to send capitalism to the dustbin, to imagine something more human, something more humane,
Yes.
something that's
Yes.
healthy for the planet. There isn't any
Yes.
reason that these things can't be. They don't have to just be our imagination, and the future does
No.
not have to be only dystopian. As
No.
we're always given those images of the future, right? The
Options. Right.
right,
Mhm. Yes.
we know humans are humans, the world is the world, nothing's going to ever be perfect, but you can put things in place so that they aren't like toxic and destructive, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
build a culture around that healing,
Yes.
maintenance of harmony, not the profit motive, right, but the collaborative
Yes, you
motive,
can.
the life,
Yes.
the
Yes.
more life to life all forms motive, right? So
Right. Right.
um
Right.
anyway,
Absolutely.
yeah, the arts, right? And there's more that we can say, um
Mhm. Always.
just in terms of how the arts have been used for organizing,
Yeah.
how and yeah, across the political spectrum, and indeed how they continue to be used organizationally to for system maintenance, right? And then the system
Mhm.
um, can also be undermined by the arts and artists, and all those rebel artists out there. That's why one of the reasons we love graffiti, right? And certain expressions of the graffiti artists and
Mhm.
the bombers, as they used to go by. Um, the folks who be climbing up sometime in the wee hours on the on the freeway overpasses, and leaving messages, right? um, all that insurgent artistic expression from the untrained masses,
Yes.
who are bubbling over with creative
Yes.
energy. Right?
Absolutely. As do all humans. It is not just the prerogative. It's a more really part of that legacy of scientific racism,
Hmm.
that there's but one well, scientific racism and just eugenics. Really, I was thinking about the kind of primary
This is the eugenic
forms
moment,
of it.
or we're
Yeah,
in a eugenic moment. I'll put
we're in a
it.
eugenic moment.
Yeah.
Has not dissipated, though
No.
the scientific thought has neutralized, debunked, done all these things, but the ideas of that have not penetrated. And we're, yes, in the eugenic moment. And the notion that that which is art is only generated by that art is a special thing and is only generated by the special if it's legit, if it's to be legitimate, you know. And so again,
Right. The
all
special
the
individuals.
the people that all of the all of the human resource, if you will, and
Hmm.
that's not having, a different word to use there, but let's just say all the wasted, rather than human resource, rather than just all the wasted human capacity to bring about, this, to bring about this lovely world, because things can only be, you're right, legitimately recognized if they emerge from a particular class, um,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, I mean, I want to, because we are coming up on 8:30, and one of the things that I want to encourage folk out of our discussion tonight is to encourage folk to actually, look at it, look through this lens, deliberately produce artifacts, whatever that is, right? Step up your work, continue it, or start one's personal artistic journey. Do that. Rethink art space as a site of power building. Rethink art space as a site of power building in and of itself, and the space of social and individual recreation and transformation. And I wanted to say that. So I
Well,
said it.
since we're making those kinds of recommendations to anyone who may view this, then let me recommend that if you are an artist, connect with other artists and connect with your local activists. And if you are an activist, seek out the artist for your political work. They need to be part of it if they aren't already, and quite intentionally.
Ashe.
So the arts are
Ashe.
there for organizing. They are one of the organizing principles of what we call human society, anyway. Right?
Absolutely.
And this is, one of those
Yes.
important. Um, well, how should I say? Uh, I think an important insight
Mm-hmm.
from what Lewis and Loeb,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of cultural studies scholars, and if I'm remembering their names correctly. But anyway, the important point they articulate, I think, really well, is the separation of spheres is an illusion, right? The notion of
Yes.
the economic, the political, and the
Yes.
cultural, right? Um,
Yes.
that their separateness is an illusion. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that each of these areas don't have their sort of distinct characteristics, or
Mm-hmm.
distinct methodologies, or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
they're
Mm-hmm.
overlapped, right? They're intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
They are
Mm-hmm.
not um, absent from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and in moments like this, uh,
Mhm.
the intensification
Mhm.
and the efforts to roll back reform and revolution and reform, to roll back the 20th century, to roll back perhaps even the 19th century. The arts are implicated in that. And just as in this country, this United States empire of the West, not only is not only are the sciences being defunded, but the arts
Mhm.
are funded, right? The arts and the
Yes.
humanities are being defunded. And for a
Yes.
very long time, the humanities, which includes the
Mhm.
arts,
Mhm.
have been minimized, marginalized, right, for a very long time, more than 100 years. That this has been the case, and it's just been a gradual marginalization in the in a preference, and talking, and really now talking about the academic areas, right, um, in favor of the technical, right, the empirical, the technical, um, the profitable. And though we know people make, certain people make gobs of money off of the arts, and primarily through the control and distribution of artistic, uh, production. The Where was I going with that? Uh, uh, um, Even though people make a lot of money off of it, it is not, the humanities, investing in the humanities and the arts are not considered profitable, right? And I remember um,
Mm.
going to college for the first time as a liberal arts major, and one of the common questions I would get from um, folks on campus, uh,
Mhm.
folks in the dorm, oh,
Mhm.
what are you going to do with that? How are you going to make money
Mhm.
with that? Right? And
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
and that was 1980.
Mhm.
Already ingrained. It was already well ingrained, right? That
Mhm.
the role of college, the role of an
Yes.
education,
Yes.
is a good job, or something monetary, right? What makes it profitable?
Right.
Nothing about, um, at
Yes.
least in the general discourse of the value of an education, nothing about either one's personal development or what it means to the community's development, just to be an
Right.
educated person. Whatever your
Right.
concentration, right? The value
Right.
that those immaterial, I guess, and I'm not even sure that's completely correct, right? But that what we
Mhm.
think of as immaterial, um,
Yes.
benefits, right, of
Right.
an educate, and particularly an education,
Right.
grounded in what we call the humanities, in which the sciences are not absent, right?
Mhm.
And so that's another discussion,
Mhm.
on the value of what we call the humanities and how to even define that. But the arts that we've been talking about, all of the various arts, right? The so-called fine arts. You went through it, earlier, just in terms of dance, right? And all these classifications, right? So-called fine arts, popular art, folk art, all the various um, iterations of the artistic, right? Literature, the musical, um, the visual, painting, sculpture, the cinematic, all the various areas, right? The kinetic, you know, and of course that's what cinema is means, right? The kinetic, right? Um,
Mhm.
Kinema, right? It comes from kinema, that
Mhm.
then gets Latinized to cinema. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm thinking about the kinetic and things like dance and
Mhm.
drama, right?
Mhm.
And, all of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
all of these arts are encompassed by the humanities, um,
Mhm.
and just as the sciences are being defunded in a way that's kind of
Yes.
unprecedented,
Yes.
the defunding of the humanities, including the arts,
Yes.
has been the case what for 60 years. In the research I did,
Mhm.
Performing Arts Society of Los Angeles, um, Motojiko Vantile Whitfield was already talking about
Mm.
um, the defunding of an arts program at one of the local
Mm.
LA schools. In fact, I've
Mhm.
found it in his papers, right?
Mhm.
A letter from one of the local
Mhm.
schools
Mhm.
saying that he they could not invite him back as an art teacher because they didn't have the
Mhm.
funding for it
Right.
this particular year. That was like 1964 or something like that.
Mhm.
1960, already, in the mid
Mhm.
60s, the
Mhm.
funding of arts was underway, and the
Because
the
what do these
making of
working class people. Right.
humanities.
Yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Yeah. I was just saying because what do these what came to mind was the just that education, the whole debate, and I'm not going to use the right terminology, but the debate or the the tension about what to teach, right? In terms of making people functional for their uh, uh, level, their level in the society, or um,
The point of Bantu
expanding
education
education.
in South
Say that
Africa,
again.
the point of
Hmm?
Bantu education in South Africa, this notion in the
Another.
mid 20th century.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, just what you're saying, right? Folks they only need so much education for the level that they're expected, the role they're expected to play in the
Right.
society. And I
It's,
was just, using the
exactly. And of
example of
course,
the
it.
Bantu education that was specifically to prepare, the indigenous Africans in Azania to be servants forever.
Right. And not no different than what is here, right?
Right.
Than what has been, no different in any space, right? The examples would abound because that is, the goal. What to teach, what not to teach in this, in the era, or in the era of public education, or what have you. There's a reason why you don't teach the enslaved African to read, all these different kinds of things. So anyway, that I was just came to mind when we're talking about um, the value of uh, arts education and the way that is, taken out of the public school curriculum and dismissed as a, unnecessary, an unnecessary element, an unnecessary kind of uh, entertainment or something.
Non-essential, right? It's not essential. It's
Non-essential. Mhm.
for what
Mhm.
these students need to know, whoever these students are, right?
Yes. And that ends up being everybody. You know what I'm saying? That ends up being everyone who is doing public education because it doesn't stop
Everyone in public
elite
education, exactly,
circles. Right.
exactly. It's the
You're
private
in.
schools keep
Yes.
their arts programs. Yes, they keep their arts programs. That's right,
Right. And anyway, yeah.
and their
So that,
language
yeah.
programs too, and all that.
And their language programs and their
The,
and their
the, the
language
elite,
programs.
everything that they want to take out of the public schools
Terrible.
remain
Yes.
in the private schools, and then the elite schools are even more funded, right there, to make sure that their children and the few scholarships that are awarded
Right.
to, you know, possible class traders to come to their
Traders.
side, The
Producing
right, yeah,
creators.
that
Yeah.
they are given every opportunity for really uh, thorough educational process, right? And again,
Yeah.
not an indoctrination and training as such,
Right.
but an effort to
Right.
genuinely engage their critical thing. And again, and speaking from direct experience of having spent a year in one of the local independent schools, private schools, um, where they had the resources to pour into the programs for the
Yes.
students who could afford to go there. This was the kind of school where the principal wasn't called principal; he was called
Right.
the headmaster. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, he was the
And
headmaster. So,
very real, very real. Looking at the in terms of the last time I was in school, and they tell me, right, well, you were in that USC program so long ago, we're teaching different things now, but one of the things that they were teaching in the and talking in the USC Masters in Teaching program
hmm
at the time were like, these ideal kinds of community life, the hybrid, right? Hybrid educational culture, right? And the value within that, the value of a community school balance, right? The creating of school schedules where there are days where people were working from home, there are days when people were going to campuses, there were, what I'm saying, all, of course, the abundance of field trips and the notion of um, the importance of starting the school day after, or let's talk about research showing that this wake up in the morning and rush off to school is not optimal for learning and whatnot, that school shouldn't start before 9:30, and all this kind of
hmm
thing, and end at 2 and 2, and yes, people are applying that research, just not in public school.
right,
Your butt has to go to work. You have to come in and make my machine go. You know what I'm saying? Your
right.
child
So
doesn't have the
you're getting trained to
opportunity.
do that in school, right? You're getting trained in those hours.
Absolutely, you're getting trained in those hours, and
Or
your
training the body
little old
clock
child
for those hours. And
and your little old child does not need to max out um their neurological receptivity and best times for learning. You don't need that, slave. You don't need that. We just need your body for what we need your body for, and in all of that part, all of that part.
yeah,
Anyway, anyway,
and the last
and
thing we
we're
need
approaching
is art
8:45.
education. Um,
Yeah.
but the kids do it anyway. You know, they end up
Yes.
drawing, dancing,
Right.
singing.
Right.
They they find their way
Absolutely. Absolutely.
because that's what humans do. Humans do
That's what
create.
humans do.
And whether
Right.
it's recognized by the certain kinds of experts or not. So it is, it's about we're coming up on 2 hours, and um,
Yeah.
so why don't we end there?
Let us in there.
Do you have any closing comments?
I
Or
don't have any closing comments. I don't have any closing comments. Let's just, give ourselves take it upon ourselves and not wait for any so-called legitimating institutions to assume
right?
our full humanity, and that humanity, the legacy of the sapien, if you will, is that
Mhm.
full expression, full intelligence, full, the capacity to build and create and envision. Let's do that, and let's
Yeah.
envision a beautiful thing and not a horrible thing. Let's do that.
All right. That says it all, I think. So, you want to say good night, Tasha?
Good night, Tasha.
Good night, Tasha. And good night, folks. We take a minute to remind you to subscribe. Please do like this video. Help us out with the algorithm, the tyranny of the algorithm, and share. And we will be back next Thursday continuing the conversation. Thank you, folks. Like I always try to do, I'll close quoting Bob Marley. Revelation reveals the truth. It takes a revolution to make a solution. See y'all.